In the shadows of a mansion too large for its silence, twin boys haven't spoken a word since the accident stole their sight 3 years ago. Their father, wealthy tech investor Nathaniel Turner, moves through his home like a ghost, haunted by guilt he refuses to face. The darkness seems permanent, until a mysterious woman named Rosie arrives for the night cleaning shift, carrying nothing but worn clothes and an old portable radio. What happens when this strange woman breaks every rule, sitting in forbidden hallways playing lullabies that sound hauntingly familiar? Why does one twin suddenly whisper, "Mommy," after years of silence? As the boys begin to see things that should be impossible, their father discovers disturbing truths about Rosie, including psychiatric records showing she died on the exact day of his family's tragic accident. Is she a fraud, a ghost, or something science cannot explain? And why is she so determined to help these children see what others refuse to acknowledge? Follow this emotional journey into the space between grief and healing, where the boundaries between worlds grow thin, and true vision comes not from the eyes but from the heart. A story that will make you question what it really means to see. Like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from to join our community of storytellers. The silence was deafening in the Turner mansion. Too deafening for a house that size. A sprawling Victorian estate sitting on 5 acres at the edge of Springfield, Illinois. 3 years had passed since the accident, and in those 3 years, not a single word had escaped the lips of 7-year-old twins Adam and Elijah Turner. The mansion had become a mausoleum, its hallways empty of laughter, its rooms devoid of light. Nathaniel Turner moved through his home like a ghost, the bags under his eyes telling the story of sleepless nights and buried grief. Once the darling of Wall Street, featured on the covers of Fortune and Forbes for his revolutionary tech investments, he now avoided public appearances. The press called it reclusive behavior after tragedy. Those who worked for him called it something else. Punishment. "The new night cleaner is here, sir," Henderson, the family's butler of 15 years, announced in hushed tones at precisely 8:01 p.m. on that crisp October evening. Nathaniel barely looked up from his desk, his finger tracing the rim of a crystal tumbler half filled with amber liquid. "Show her the rooms to avoid. Make sure she understands the rules." "Yes, sir. She seems different from the others." A flash of irritation crossed Nathaniel's face. "Different how?" Henderson hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Quieter, observant. She asked specifically about the children, sir." "Fire her." "Sir, we've gone through 5 cleaners this month alone. Perhaps—" "Fine," Nathaniel snapped, slamming his glass down. "But make it abundantly clear, the boys' wing is off limits, and under no circumstances is she to disturb them." As Henderson left, Nathaniel turned to stare at the portrait above his fireplace. A woman with striking green eyes and an enigmatic smile, holding 2 identical toddlers with matching dimples. His wife, Caroline. Gone now, like everything else that mattered. Downstairs, Rosie Whittaker stood in the kitchen, her weathered hands clasping a small portable radio. Unlike the other cleaners who'd come wearing crisp uniforms, Rosie wore a faded blue cardigan over simple clothes. Her graying hair was pulled back in a loose bun and fine lines surrounded her eyes, the kind that come from both laughter and sorrow. "These are the areas you'll clean," Henderson explained, pointing to a map of the first floor. "Kitchen, library, main hallway, Mr. Turner's study if he's not in it, guest bathrooms. The second floor is entirely off limits except for the East Wing guest rooms. Under no circumstances are you to enter the West Wing where the children's rooms are located." Rosie nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving Henderson's. "The children, they're twins, correct?" Henderson stiffened. "That information isn't relevant to your duties." "Of course," she said softly. I had twins myself once." Something in her voice made Henderson pause. "Had?" She didn't answer. Instead, she asked, "What happened to them? The Turner boys?" Henderson glanced around nervously. "That's not appropriate conversation, Ms. Whittaker." "Now, if you'll begin with the kitchen." "They're blind," she said, not as a question but as a statement. "Since the accident." Henderson's eyes widened. How did you— People talk in small towns, she said, a sad smile crossing her face. Especially about the rich ones. She picked up her cleaning supplies, the small radio dangling from a worn leather strap on her shoulder. I'll start now. Don't worry about me, Mr. Henderson. I know my place. For 2 hours, Rosie cleaned methodically, moving from room to room with quiet efficiency. But at exactly 10:30 p.m., when Henderson had retired to his quarters and the mansion fell into complete silence, she did something unexpected. Instead of continuing with the downstairs rooms, she slowly climbed the grand staircase, her footsteps impossibly light on the marble steps. She moved through the darkened hallway like someone who knew exactly where she was going, despite this being her first night. The west wing was marked by double doors, closed firmly against intruders. Rosie stood before them for a long moment, her fingers brushing against the polished wood. Then, without hesitation, she turned the handle and slipped inside. The hallway beyond was darker still, the windows covered with heavy blackout curtains. Rosie made no attempt to turn on lights. Instead, she felt her way along the wall until she reached a spot halfway down the corridor, directly between 2 bedroom doors. There, she lowered herself to the floor, her back against the wall, and placed the radio beside her. Her fingers fumbled with the dial, turning past static and late-night talk shows until she found a station that seemed to broadcast nothing but white noise. And then, something strange happened. Rosie closed her eyes, placed her hands on the radio, and whispered something inaudible. The static suddenly cleared, replaced by the soft, melodic voice of a woman singing a lullaby, a haunting tune about stars guiding lost children home. Behind the door to the left, 7-year-old Elijah Turner sat upright in his bed, his sightless eyes wide open. He turned his head toward the wall, toward the music filtering through from the hallway. "Adam," he whispered, reaching across to the identical bed where his brother lay. It was the first word he had spoken in 3 years. "Adam, do you hear that?" In the other bed, Adam remained motionless, but his breathing changed, quicker, more alert. "It sounds like—" Elijah's voice cracked from disuse. "Like Mommy." In the hallway, Rosie continued to sit motionless, the lullaby playing softly. A single tear rolled down her cheek, catching the moonlight that filtered through a crack in the curtains. Inside Elijah's room, the boy slid from his bed, his hands outstretched in the darkness he had lived in since the accident. His feet found their way across the familiar floor until he reached the door. With trembling fingers, he touched the wood, leaning his forehead against it. "Mommy," he whispered, the word barely audible. On the other side, Rosie's eyes snapped open. The lullaby continued to play, but now her hand pressed against the door, mirroring the child's position exactly. "Not yet, little one," she whispered back, though the door blocked her words from reaching him. "But soon you'll see again." In his office downstairs, Nathaniel Turner jolted awake from a nightmare, the same one that had haunted him for years. Screeching tires, shattering glass, Caroline's scream cut suddenly short. He rubbed his face, reached for his glass, and found it empty. Above him, unseen by anyone, the chandelier lights flickered briefly as if responding to some unseen force. And in the twins' bedroom hallway, Rosie smiled as if she understood exactly what was happening. "First night," she whispered to herself. "First step." Morning light struggled through the heavy drapes of Nathaniel Turner's bedroom, creating thin golden lines across the Persian rug. He hadn't slept well, hadn't slept properly in 3 years if he was being honest with himself. The nightmares were always the same: screeching tires, Caroline's scream, and then that horrible silence followed by the twins crying. He ran his fingers through his salt and pepper hair, noticing more gray than there had been even a month ago. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," Nathaniel called, his voice raspy from sleep and too much whiskey. Henderson appeared, impeccably dressed as always, a silver tray balanced in one hand. "Your coffee, sir." He placed the tray on the nightstand, then hesitated, something unusual for the normally efficient butler. "Sir, there's something I feel I should mention." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. What is it? It's about the new cleaner, Rosie. Henderson cleared his throat. Mrs. Collins reports that she spent an unusual amount of time on the second floor last night. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. The children's wing? No direct evidence of that, sir. But she was upstairs longer than needed for just the guest rooms. Henderson's face remained professionally neutral, but his eyes betrayed concern. And this morning, when checking the security logs, I noticed the motion sensors in the west hallway were triggered twice between 10:30 and midnight. Nathaniel swung his legs over the side of the bed, suddenly alert. The boys are fine, sir. I checked on them myself before coming to you. Nathaniel stared into his coffee, the surface black and still like a midnight lake. After a moment, he said, Install cameras in the upstairs hallway, discreetly. I want to know exactly what this woman is doing. Of course, sir. Is there anything else? Has she left yet? No, sir. She's actually requested to stay and help with the morning cleaning as well. Said something about wanting to get to know the rhythm of the house. Nathaniel frowned. That's not in her contract. No, sir. Fine. Let her stay. I want to observe her myself. He took a sip of his coffee. And Henderson? Not a word about the cameras. Understood, sir. Downstairs in the east wing, Rosie hummed softly to herself as she dusted the bookshelves in the library. Her radio sat on a nearby table, playing classical music at a low volume. Unlike the night before, the device seemed perfectly ordinary now, just an old portable radio that occasionally crackled with static. Mrs. Collins, the day housekeeper, watched her suspiciously from the doorway. The library was already cleaned yesterday, she said sharply. Rosie smiled without turning around. Some dust always finds its way back, like memories. She ran her fingers along the spine of a leather-bound book. Do the boys ever come in here? Mrs. Collins stiffened. That's not your concern. Books are wonderful for children who can't see, Rosie continued, as if she hadn't heard the rebuke. The texture of the pages, the smell of the binding, the weight of stories in their hands. My son used to love when I'd read to him. He'd close his eyes and say he could see the stories better that way. You have children? Mrs. Collins asked, curiosity momentarily overriding her suspicion. Rosie's hand paused on a book of fairy tales. Had, she said softly. Then, changing the subject, she asked, Does Mr. Turner read to them? Mr. Turner is a very busy man, Mrs. Collins replied stiffly. Now, if you finished in here, the dining room needs attention. As Mrs. Collins walked away, Rosie pulled the fairy tale book from the shelf and opened it to a story about a blind prince who could see magic that others couldn't. She smiled to herself, tucked the book under her arm, and followed the housekeeper out. Later that afternoon, Nathaniel sat in his study reviewing security footage from the newly installed cameras. He watched as Rosie moved through the upstairs hallway, pausing occasionally as if listening for something. Nothing overtly suspicious, until she reached the west wing doors. There she stopped, placed her hand against the wood, and stood motionless for nearly a minute before continuing on her way. What are you up to? Nathaniel muttered to himself. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. It was Dr. Mitchell, the twins' private physician, arriving for their monthly checkup. Any changes? Nathaniel asked as they walked upstairs together. Dr. Mitchell shook his head. I don't expect any, Mr. Turner. The damage to their optic nerves was extensive. They entered Adam's room first. The boy sat perfectly still on his bed, his unseeing eyes fixed on the wall. Hello, Adam, Dr. Mitchell said cheerfully. How are we feeling today? As usual, Adam didn't respond. The doctor proceeded with his examination, checking pupils, blood pressure, reflexes, while Nathaniel watched from the doorway, his face a mask of practiced neutrality. In the hallway, Rosie appeared with fresh towels, seemingly on a legitimate errand. She slowed as she passed Nathaniel, nodding respectfully but saying nothing. The portable radio at her hip crackled softly. Inside the bedroom, something unusual happened. Adam's head turned slightly, as if tracking a sound. Doctor? Mitchell paused, noticing the movement. Adam, he said, did you hear something? For a brief moment it seemed like the boy might respond. His lips parted slightly, but then he returned to his statue-like state. Dr. Mitchell raised an eyebrow at Nathaniel, who had also noticed the reaction. That's new, the doctor whispered. They moved to Elijah's room next. Unlike his brother, Elijah was standing by the window, his fingers tracing patterns on the glass. Hello, Elijah. Doctor. Mitchell greeted him. To both men's shock, Elijah turned his head in their direction. Radio, he said, his voice raspy from disuse. Want radio. Nathaniel froze, his hand gripping the doorframe. It was the first word either of his sons had spoken since the accident. Dr. Mitchell recovered first, approaching Elijah slowly. What radio, Elijah? Do you hear a radio? Elijah's unseeing eyes drifted past the doctor, toward the door where Nathaniel stood. Woman's radio. It plays Mommy. A chill ran down Nathaniel's spine. From the hallway came the soft sound of something being dropped, a towel perhaps, and hurried footsteps moving away. That night, after ensuring both boys were asleep, Nathaniel confronted Henderson in his study. Tell me everything you know about this woman, Rosie. Where did she come from? Who recommended her? Henderson shifted uncomfortably. She came with references from the Wilsons across town. Said she'd worked for them for years. Call them, now. Henderson hesitated. Sir, it's nearly midnight. I don't care if it's 3 in the morning. Call them. 20 minutes later, Henderson returned, his face pale. Sir, the Wilsons have never employed anyone named Rosie Whitaker. They've never even heard of her. Nathaniel's eyes hardened. Find out who she really is. And until then, I want someone watching the boys' rooms at all times. He turned to the window, staring out at the darkness. There's something not right about that woman. And I intend to find out what it is. Rain pelted against the windows of the Turner mansion, turning the morning light gray and somber. Nathaniel hadn't slept at all, his mind racing with questions about the mysterious woman who had somehow managed to reach his sons when no one else could. A single word from Elijah, the first in 3 years, had shattered the frozen lake of his existence, sending ripples through everything he thought he knew. I want her background checked thoroughly, Nathaniel instructed his head of security, a former police detective named Reeves. They sat in his study, the fire crackling in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the room. Social security, previous employment, criminal record, everything. Reeves nodded, making notes in a small black notebook. What about surveillance in the meantime? Henderson mentioned you wanted the boys watched. 24 hours. And I want to know where this Rosie woman is at all times. Nathaniel rubbed his temples, feeling the beginnings of a migraine. There's something about her. Something familiar I can't place. As Reeves left, Nathaniel found himself drawn to the small room at the end of the east wing, Caroline's study, untouched since her death. He rarely went in there. The pain was still too raw, too immediate. But today, something pulled him toward it, like an invisible thread tugging at his heart. The door creaked as he pushed it open. Dust motes danced in the thin beam of light that filtered through the curtains. Everything was exactly as she had left it. Papers neatly stacked on the desk, a half-empty cup of tea, long since dried up. Her reading glasses perched on top of a manuscript she had been editing. Caroline had been a children's book editor before the twins were born, specializing in stories for visually impaired children. Nathaniel moved through the room like a man in a trance, his fingers trailing over the familiar objects. On the bookshelf stood framed photographs, Caroline holding the newborn twins, all of them at the beach, a family Christmas with snow falling outside. Memories from a different lifetime. As he turned to leave, his eye caught something tucked behind the desk, a small storage cabinet he hadn't opened in years. Acting on impulse, he knelt down and pulled it open. Inside were dozens of cassette tapes, each labeled in Caroline's neat handwriting. Adam and Elijah's first words, bath time songs, bedtime stories, June. The tapes were all organized chronologically, a meticulous archive of their family life. One tape, however, was different from the others. Instead of being stored in a plastic case, it was wrapped in a soft blue ribbon, the exact shade of blue that Caroline had always loved. Nathaniel's hands trembled as he picked it up. There was no label, just the ribbon. He hadn't listened to any of these tapes since the accident. Couldn't bear to hear Caroline's voice, to be reminded of what he'd lost. But now, with shaking hands, he took the blue ribbon tape to the old cassette player on Caroline's desk and inserted it. The tape hissed with static for a moment, and then Caroline's voice filled the room, soft and clear as if she were standing right beside him. "My darling boys," her voice began. "If you're listening to this, I want you to know how much I love you. Every day with you is a miracle I never thought I'd have." Nathaniel's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't one of their family recordings. This was something else entirely. Carolyn continued, her voice occasionally breaking with emotion. "Life can change in an instant. One moment everything is perfect and the next. But I want you to remember that even in darkness there is always light to be found. You just have to know how to look for it." In the background, he could hear the twins laughing and babbling. They couldn't have been more than a year old when this was recorded. "No matter what happens," Caroline's voice continued, "I will always find a way back to you, always. And if ever you feel lost, just close your eyes and listen. Really listen. I'll be there in the spaces between heartbeats, in the quiet moments before sleep, in the songs that make your soul remember." The tape continued for another minute. Caroline reciting a prayer that she had always said with the boys at bedtime, and then it clicked off. Nathaniel sat frozen, tears streaming down his face. Why had she made this tape? It was almost as if she had known. A noise at the doorway startled him. He turned to find Rosie standing there, her face pale, her eyes fixed on the tape player. "That recording," she said softly. "It wasn't meant for you to hear yet." Nathaniel shot to his feet, anger surging through him. "How did you get in here? This room is off limits to everyone." Rosie didn't flinch at his anger. She simply stood there, her hands clasped in front of her, that old radio still hanging from her shoulder. "I was drawn to it," she said simply, "just like you were." "Who are you?" Nathaniel demanded, advancing toward her. "What do you want with my family?" Rosie's eyes, a deep brown that seemed to hold centuries of sadness, met his unflinchingly. "I'm just a cleaner, Mr. Turner." "Bullshit," he spat. "The Wilsons never heard of you. Your references are fake. You somehow got my son to speak after 3 years of silence. And now I find you in my wife's private study with a tape I've never heard before. Tell me the truth." A small, sad smile touched Rosie's lips. "The truth is rarely what we think it is, Mr. Turner. Sometimes it's buried so deep we need help digging it out." She glanced at the tape player. "That recording wasn't meant for you to hear now. It was meant for your sons." "How would you know that? How would you know anything about this tape?" Rosie looked down at her worn hands. "Everything has its time, Mr. Turner. The boys are starting to see." "See, they're blind," Nathaniel nearly shouted. "There are many ways to see," Rosie replied calmly. "Your wife understood that. Why can't you?" Before Nathaniel could respond, a commotion from upstairs drew their attention, shouting, the sound of something falling. They both rushed toward the noise, finding Henderson outside Elijah's room looking distressed. "Sir, you need to see this," the butler said, his normally composed face showing clear alarm. Inside the room, Elijah sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by dozens of sheets of paper. In his hand, he held a crayon, moving it across the page with surprising precision for a child who couldn't see. On each paper was a drawing, crude but recognizable shapes: a house, a tree, a car. And on the paper in front of him, he was drawing a face, a woman's face with long hair and a gentle smile. It was unmistakably Caroline. "How is he doing this?" Nathaniel whispered, stunned. From the doorway, Rosie watched with that same sad smile. "He's remembering," she said softly. "Sometimes the mind sees what the eyes cannot." Nathaniel turned to her, confusion and hope warring on his face. "What's happening to my sons?" Rosie's eyes filled with tears. They're finding their way back to the light, Mr. Turner. The question is, are you ready to follow them there? Doctor? James Whitfield had been a neurologist for 30 years, specializing in cases that other doctors deemed hopeless. His salt and pepper beard and kind eyes gave him the appearance of a wise grandfather, rather than one of the country's leading brain specialists. Today, he stood in the Turner Mansion's grand living room, his weathered medical bag resting beside him, studying the scans of the twins' brains with evident fascination. "Remarkable," he murmured, holding an MRI film up to the light. "Absolutely remarkable." Nathaniel paced anxiously behind him, his expensive Italian loafers sinking into the plush carpet with each step. The rain continued to lash against the windows, the weather matching his turbulent emotions. "What is it? What do you see?" Dr. Whitfield placed the scan on the antique coffee table, next to 5 others that showed different angles of the twins' brain activity. "Mr. Turner, when I examined your sons 3 days after the accident, their visual cortices showed almost no activity. The trauma to their optic nerves was severe, and the brain regions responsible for processing visual information had essentially gone dormant." "I remember," Nathaniel said quietly, the memory of that devastating diagnosis still raw. "You told me they would never see again. And medically speaking, that should still be true." The doctor tapped one of the new scans. "Their optic nerves remain damaged. They still cannot physically see in the traditional sense. But these new scans show something I've never encountered before." "Which is?" "Activity. Significant activity in the visual processing centers of their brains." He pointed to colorful areas on the scan. "It's as if dormant parts of their brains have suddenly awakened. It's almost like—" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "It's as if they're seeing but through a different pathway altogether." Nathaniel sank into a leather armchair, his legs suddenly weak. "How is that possible?" "I don't know," Dr. Whitfield admitted. "There are documented cases of blind people developing enhanced spatial awareness, even a form of echolocation. But this is different. The patterns I'm seeing suggest actual visual processing, just rerouted somehow. Could it be temporary? Possibly. But I'd need to run more tests to—" The door opened and Henderson appeared. "Excuse me, sir. The boys are asking for their snack, and—" He hesitated, glancing at the doctor. "What is it, Henderson?" Nathaniel asked, noting the butler's discomfort. "Elijah is asking for Ms. Whitaker, sir," rather insistently. Nathaniel and Dr. Whitfield exchanged glances. "Bring the boys down here," Nathaniel said. "I want Dr. Whitfield to observe them directly." While they waited, Nathaniel filled the doctor in on the mysterious appearance of Rosie and the strange occurrences that had followed. "She seems to have some kind of connection to them that I can't explain. And there's this." He pulled out his phone and showed the doctor photos of Elijah's drawings. Dr. Whitfield studied the images with growing amazement. These were done by a blind child? When Nathaniel nodded, he shook his head in disbelief. The spatial awareness, the proportions. It's as if he can see what he's drawing. Henderson returned with the twins, each boy holding one of his hands. At 7 years old, they were mirror images of each other, dark hair like their father's, but with Caroline's delicate features. They moved with the careful precision of blind children accustomed to navigating by memory and touch. But there was a new confidence in their steps that hadn't been there before. "Hello, boys," Dr. Whitfield said warmly. "Do you remember me, Doctor?" "James?" To everyone's surprise, both boys turned toward his voice. "Doctor with the peppermint candy," Adam said softly, breaking his silence for the first time. His voice was raspy from disuse, but the words were clear. Dr. Whitfield's eyes widened. He did indeed always carry peppermint candies in his pocket for his younger patients, but he hadn't given the boys any since before the accident. "That's right," he said, trying to keep the astonishment from his voice. "Would you like one now?" Both boys nodded. Dr. Whitfield reached into his pocket and unwrapped 2 candies, then held them out. What happened next made even the skeptical doctor gasp. Without hesitation or fumbling, Each twin reached out and took a candy directly from his palm, as if they could see exactly where they were. "How did you know where the candies were?" Nathaniel asked, his voice barely a whisper. Elijah popped the candy into his mouth before answering. "We saw them." "But your eyes—" "Not with eyes," Adam interrupted. "With here." He touched his temple. "Where's Rosie?" Elijah asked, looking around the room as if searching for her. "She promised to read us a story today." Nathaniel felt a chill run down his spine. "How do you know Rosie?" "She comes at night," Adam said. "Sits in the hallway, plays mommy's songs. And she smells like cinnamon and rain," Elijah added. "Like mommy did." Dr. Whitfield caught Nathaniel's eye, his professional demeanor giving way to wonder. "Mr. Turner, whatever is happening here defies conventional medical explanation. These boys are experiencing some form of perception that isn't through their eyes but is remarkably accurate." Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "So what do I do? Is it dangerous? Could it harm them somehow?" Before the doctor could answer, the lights in the living room flickered, then dimmed momentarily. In the sudden semi-darkness, Elijah reached out and grabbed his father's hand. "She's here," he whispered. The lights returned to normal, but a new presence filled the room. Rosie stood in the doorway, her worn blue cardigan draped over her shoulders, that ever-present radio hanging at her side. Her eyes went immediately to the twins, a gentle smile spreading across her face. "Hello, boys," she said softly. "Rosie," both twins exclaimed in unison, turning toward her voice with perfect accuracy. They scrambled to their feet and moved toward her without hesitation, navigating around the coffee table and Dr. Whitfield's bag as if they could see every obstacle. Nathaniel watched in stunned silence as Rosie knelt down, and the twins threw their arms around her neck. They clung to her with the desperate affection of children who had been lost in darkness for too long. "You came back," Elijah said, his small hand touching her cheek. "I promised I would, didn't I?" she replied, her voice thick with emotion. Dr. Whitfield moved to stand beside Nathaniel. "Who is she?" he whispered. "I wish I knew," Nathaniel answered, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of hope and fear. "But whatever she's doing, it's bringing them back." As if sensing they were talking about her, Rosie looked up, her eyes meeting Nathaniel's. In that moment, something passed between them. An understanding, a challenge, a promise. She knew more than she was saying, and they both knew it. "The storm is getting worse," she said, still holding the twins close. "The boys should rest before dinner. Their minds are working in new ways, and that takes energy." Without waiting for permission, she gently guided the twins toward the staircase. They went willingly, each holding one of her hands, chattering excitedly about the story she had promised them. "Mr. Turner," Dr. Whitfield said quietly as they watched the trio ascend the stairs, "I've seen many medical miracles in my career, but this—" He shook his head in wonder. "This woman may be the key to understanding what's happening to your sons. Whatever you do, don't send her away. Not yet." Nathaniel nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Rosie's retreating form. "I won't, but I intend to find out exactly who she is and what she wants with my family." Outside, lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the mansion in a brief, ghostly glow. For just a moment, Nathaniel could have sworn he saw 3 figures on the staircase, not 4, as if someone else, someone invisible to the naked eye, was ascending alongside them. The basement of the Turner mansion was a labyrinth of storage rooms, each filled with the accumulated possessions of generations. Dust motes danced in the beam of Nathaniel's flashlight as he made his way through the narrow corridors between stacked boxes and forgotten furniture. The storm had knocked out the power an hour ago, and the emergency generator only covered essential areas of the house, not this underground vault of memories. Reeves followed close behind, his own flashlight sweeping methodically across the shadowed corners. "You're sure it's down here, sir?" "Positive," Nathaniel replied, his voice echoing slightly against the concrete walls. "After Caroline died, I couldn't bear to look at any of it. I had everything from the accident boxed up and brought down here. The police report, the medical files, the personal effects recovered from the crash site. All of it buried deep beneath the house, just like the truth Nathaniel had been running from for 3 years. They reached a section marked Storage C in faded black marker. Nathaniel's hand trembled slightly as he pulled a set of keys from his pocket and unlocked the padlock securing the room. "What exactly are we looking for?" Reeves asked, shining his light on the dusty boxes piled inside. "Anything that might explain what's happening with the boys," Nathaniel said, "and anything connected to this woman, Rosie." They worked in silence for nearly an hour, methodically opening boxes and examining their contents. Police photographs of the mangled car made Nathaniel's stomach clench. Caroline's personal items from the crash, her purse, her shattered phone, a blood-stained scarf, brought tears to his eyes that he quickly blinked away. "Sir?" Reeves called from the far corner. "I think I found something." He held up a manila envelope, thick with documents. The hospital logo was visible in the beam of the flashlight, but it wasn't the local hospital where the twins had been treated after the accident. This was from somewhere else, Greenwood Psychiatric Facility, a name that struck no chord of recognition in Nathaniel's memory. "What is that?" he asked, taking the envelope from Reeves. "It was in a box with your wife's personal papers, sealed." Nathaniel tore open the envelope, his curiosity overcoming any hesitation. Inside were medical records, psychiatric evaluations, and treatment notes, all for a patient named Rose Whitaker. "Rose, not Rosie," Nathaniel murmured, scanning the documents with growing disbelief. According to the records, Rose Whitaker had been admitted to Greenwood 10 years ago following a house fire that had claimed the life of her young son. Diagnosis: severe post-traumatic stress disorder with delusional features. The most recent document was a discharge summary dated just 6 months ago. Patient continues to express belief that she can help other children see what her son saw before his death. Maintains fixation on mothers who have lost children. While medication has reduced acute psychotic episodes, underlying delusional framework remains intact. Nathaniel's blood ran cold. "She's been in my house, with my children." "There's more, sir," Reeves said, pointing to a page that had slipped to the floor. It was a newspaper clipping about the fire that had killed Rose's son. The boy's name jumped out from the page. Elijah. "Jesus," Nathaniel whispered. She lost a son named Elijah. The implications sent his mind spinning. Was this all some elaborate delusion? A disturbed woman fixating on his family because of a shared name? But that didn't explain the twins' sudden progress, their ability to see without seeing, the drawings, the way they responded to her. A loud crack of thunder shook the house above them and the flashlights flickered momentarily. When they stabilized, Nathaniel noticed something that had fallen from between the pages of the file, a small photograph. He picked it up, tilting it toward the light. It showed a woman who was unmistakably a younger Rosie, standing beside a man who looked remarkably like Nathaniel himself. Between them was a small boy, perhaps 4 years old. They were smiling, standing in front of a modest house with a red door. "Who's the man?" Reeves asked, peering over Nathaniel's shoulder. "I have no idea," Nathaniel replied, his voice barely audible over the pounding of his heart. "But he could be my brother." They gathered the documents and hurried back upstairs where the storm continued to rage outside. The mansion was eerily quiet, lit only by the emergency lights that cast long shadows down the hallways. "Find her," Nathaniel instructed Reeves. "Bring her to my study. I want answers." But Rosie wasn't in the kitchen where she'd been assigned to work that evening. She wasn't in the library or the living room. Henderson reported that he'd last seen her heading toward the garden shortly before the power went out. The garden? In this storm? Nathaniel moved to the window, peering out at the rain-lashed grounds. Lightning illuminated the landscape in strobing flashes, revealing the skeletal trees bending in the wind, the rose bushes Caroline had loved so much thrashing against their trellises. And there, standing perfectly still amid the chaos, was Rosie. She wore no coat despite the downpour. her gray hair plastered to her head, her face turned up toward the raging sky as if in communion with the storm itself. Without a word to Reeves or Henderson, Nathaniel grabbed a raincoat from the hook by the door and strode out into the tempest. The wind nearly knocked him off his feet as he stepped onto the terrace. Rain pelted his face, cold and sharp as needles. He struggled across the lawn toward the solitary figure, his shoes sinking into the sodden grass. "Rosie!" he shouted, his voice nearly lost in the howling wind. She turned slowly, unsurprised by his presence. Even drenched and buffeted by the storm, she maintained that strange calm that seemed to surround her like an invisible shield. "You found the file," she said simply. It wasn't a question. "Who are you?" Nathaniel demanded, holding up the photograph that had been hidden among the documents. "What do you want with my family?" Lightning cracked overhead, throwing her face into sharp relief. In that moment, with water streaming down her cheeks like tears, she looked both ancient and timeless. "I told you who I am," she replied. "A cleaner, someone who fixes what's broken." "You were in a psychiatric hospital." "Yes." She showed no shame, no defensiveness at his accusation. "Grief can break the mind, Mr. Turner, just as it can break a family." "Your son," Nathaniel said, his voice softening despite himself. His name was Elijah. Something flickered in her eyes. Pain, perhaps, or simply recognition. "Yes, my beautiful boy. He was special, like your twins. He could see things others couldn't. And he died in a fire." Rosie nodded, her gaze drifting past Nathaniel to the mansion behind him. "Fire takes, but sometimes it gives too. It transforms, purifies." She refocused on Nathaniel, her eyes suddenly intense. "Your boys are starting to see beyond the veil, Mr. Turner, just like my Elijah could. The question is, are you brave enough to look where they're looking?" "What does that mean? What are you doing to them?" "I'm not doing anything to them," she said, her voice rising slightly to be heard above a fresh volley of thunder. "I'm simply showing them how to use what they already have, what the accident awakened in them." Nathaniel took a step closer, rain streaming down his face. "Why? Why my family?" "Because she asked me to," Rosie said simply. "She? Who?" But at that moment, the mansion behind them went completely dark as the generator failed. In the sudden darkness, Rosie seemed to disappear before his eyes, though he hadn't seen her move. "Rosie?" he called, spinning around. But she was gone, vanished into the storm as if she'd never been there at all. Nathaniel stood alone in the rain, the photograph clutched in his hand, questions swirling in his mind like the storm clouds above. Who was this woman really? What connection did she have to his family? And most disturbing of all, who had asked her to come? Morning arrived with unsettling stillness, the storm having exhausted itself sometime in the night. Pale sunlight streamed through the mansion windows, illuminating the aftermath. Fallen branches scattered across the lawn, rose petals torn from their stems, puddles reflecting the clear blue sky like shattered mirrors. Inside, the house hummed with tension. "What do you mean you can't find her?" Nathaniel demanded, pacing his study like a caged animal. The sleepless night had left dark circles under his eyes and a tremor in his hands. "People don't just vanish." Henderson stood by the door, his normally impeccable posture slightly stooped with exhaustion. "We've searched every room, sir. Ms. Whitaker is nowhere on the premises. Her few belongings are gone from her quarters, including that radio she always carried." "Check the security footage." "We have, sir. There's a problem." Henderson hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "The cameras show her entering the main hallway at 9:42 p.m., during the worst of the storm. She walks down the corridor toward the kitchen and then—" He spread his hands helplessly. "She simply disappears from the frame. One moment she's there, the next she's gone." "That's impossible." "Yes, sir." Mr. Reeves thought perhaps there was a power fluctuation, but the timestamp continues uninterrupted. There's no gap in the recording. Nathaniel ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "And the background check?" "Most unusual, sir." According to official records, Rose Whitaker died 3 years ago. What? Nathaniel stopped pacing, his face draining of color. Yes, sir. The last official record is a death certificate filed in Cook County, Illinois. Cause of death listed as cardiac arrest. The date is... Henderson paused, consulting his notes. October 17th, 3 years ago. The date hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. That's the date of our accident. The day Caroline died. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the corner. A wedding gift from Caroline's parents, still keeping perfect time after all these years. Sir, Henderson ventured carefully. There's something else. The boys are asking for her. They seem agitated. Nathaniel moved to the window, staring out at the garden where he'd confronted Rosie just hours before. Who was she? A ghost? A delusion? Some kind of elaborate con artist? None of it made sense, yet he couldn't deny the effect she'd had on his sons. For the first time in 3 years, they were speaking, responding, even drawing. Whatever she was, she had reached them when no one else could. I'll talk to them, he said finally. But first, I want to check something. In the library, Nathaniel pulled up the mansion's personnel database on his laptop. Every employee, past and present, was meticulously documented here. Background checks, employment contracts, tax forms, everything. He typed Whitaker into the search field. No results. He tried Rosie and Rose separately. Nothing. According to the system, no one by that name had ever been employed at the Turner Mansion. Yet Henderson had processed her paperwork personally. He remembered signing the employment contract himself. A chill ran down Nathaniel's spine. He closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair, trying to make sense of the impossible. A woman appears out of nowhere, connects with his blind sons in ways no one else has been able to, then vanishes without a trace, leaving no evidence she was ever there at all, except for the psychiatric file and the photograph. Those were real, tangible proof she existed. Nathaniel reached into his pocket and pulled out the photo he'd found in the basement. In the light of day, he studied it more carefully. The woman who was unmistakably a younger Rosie, the man who bore such a striking resemblance to himself, the small boy named Elijah. They looked happy, normal. Not like a family touched by tragedy or mental illness. He turned the photo over. On the back, written in faded blue ink, were the words, Robert, Rose and Elijah, summer 1997. Robert. The name struck no chord of recognition. Was he a distant relative Nathaniel had never met? A doppelganger with no actual connection? He made a mental note to have Reeves investigate further. Upstairs, the sound of breaking glass shattered the morning quiet. Nathaniel shoved the photo back into his pocket and raced toward the twins' wing, his heart pounding. He found Henderson and Mrs. Collins outside Adam's room, their faces pale with concern. He threw his breakfast tray at the wall, Mrs. Collins explained, wringing her hands. Both of them are refusing to eat. They keep saying they won't do anything until Rosie comes back. Nathaniel took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The room was in disarray, sheets pulled from the bed, books scattered across the floor, scrambled eggs sliding down the wall where the tray had hit. Adam sat in the center of the chaos, his small face flushed with anger. Elijah stood by the window, his hand pressed against the glass as if searching for something in the distance. Boys, Nathaniel said gently, stepping carefully over a broken water glass. We need to talk about Rosie. Where is she? Adam demanded, his voice stronger and clearer than Nathaniel had heard in years. You made her go away, didn't you? No, I didn't make her leave. She left on her own. He moved closer to Adam, crouching down to his level. But I'm trying to understand why she was here in the first place. Can you tell me what she did when she was with you? Adam's unseeing eyes seemed to look right through Nathaniel. She helped us remember how to see. See what, exactly? Everything, Elijah said from the window. The colors are different now, brighter. And sometimes there are people. A chill ran down Nathaniel's spine. What people? Elijah turned toward his father's voice, his expression serious. The ones in between, the ones who got lost. He paused, his head tilting slightly as if listening to something only he could hear. Like Mommy. Nathaniel felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. What did you say? Mommy's lost, Adam said matter-of-factly. She's trying to find her way back, but something's blocking her. That's why Rosie came, to help clear the path. Nathaniel stared at his sons. These children who had been silent and withdrawn for 3 years, now speaking of the dead as if they were merely in another room. Was this some elaborate fantasy they'd constructed? A coping mechanism? Or something else entirely? Boys, he said carefully, your mother died in the accident. You know that, right? Both twins turned toward him with identical expressions of confusion. Her body died, Elijah clarified as if explaining something simple to someone very dense. But she's still here. She's always been here. You just couldn't see her because you were too sad. And too guilty, Adam added quietly. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with accusation. Guilt. Yes, Nathaniel had carried it like a stone in his chest for 3 years. The argument with Caroline just before the crash. The terrible things he'd said to her. The way he'd taken his eyes off the road for just a moment. How do you know about that? He whispered. Rosie showed us, Elijah said. With her radio. It plays memories, not music. Before Nathaniel could process this strange statement, a noise from downstairs caught their attention. The front door opening, voices in the foyer. Sir? Henderson called up the staircase. Dr. Whitfield is here, and he's brought someone with him. Nathaniel glanced at the twins, both of whom had suddenly gone very still, their heads cocked in identical poses of intense listening. She's back, Adam whispered, a smile spreading across his face. Who's back? Nathaniel asked, already knowing the answer. But the twins didn't respond. They simply stood and moved with surprising confidence toward the door, navigating around the scattered obstacles without hesitation, as if they could see every detail of the room with perfect clarity. The autumn leaves crunched beneath the tires of Nathaniel's Range Rover as it wound through the wrought iron gates of Oakwood Cemetery. The morning was crisp and clear, the sky a perfect October blue, the same shade as Caroline's favorite dress, the one she'd worn on their first date 12 years ago. Nathaniel gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white with tension. In the back seat, Adam and Elijah sat quietly, their small hands clasped together between them. They were dressed in matching navy blue sweaters and gray slacks, their first time in proper clothes since the accident. The past 3 years they had existed in pajamas and comfortable loungewear. Their world shrunk to the confines of their darkened rooms. But today was different. Today they had insisted on coming here. Are you sure about this? Dr. Whitfield asked from the passenger seat, his voice low enough that the twins couldn't hear. It's been 3 years since they visited her grave. The emotional impact could be... They asked for this, Nathaniel interrupted, his eyes fixed on the winding cemetery road. They said they needed to come. After everything that's happened, I'm not going to deny them. Dr. Whitfield nodded, though concern still lined his face. And the woman? Rosie? She just disappeared again after bringing the cassette player? Nathaniel's mind flashed back to the previous evening. Dr. Whitfield arriving at the door, a vintage cassette player in his hands, claiming a woman had stopped him in the driveway and asked him to deliver it. She said the boys would know what to do with it, the doctor had explained, bewildered. But when they'd looked outside, there was no sign of her, just tire tracks in the mud where the doctor's car had parked. Gone, Nathaniel confirmed, like a ghost. Yet she left something very tangible behind. Doctor? Whitfield glanced over his shoulder at the cassette player now sitting on the seat between the twins. It was an old model, the kind popular in the 1980s, with large buttons and a carrying handle. A blue ribbon, the same shade as the one Nathaniel had found on the tape in Caroline's study, was tied around it in a perfect bow. The car rolled to a stop at the crest of a small hill. From here they could see the Turner family plot, marked by a simple white marble headstone under the spreading branches of an ancient oak tree. Caroline had always loved oak trees, their strength, their endurance, their quiet dignity. "We're here," Nathaniel announced, his voice catching slightly. He hadn't visited the grave in months, the pain still too raw, the guilt too heavy. To his surprise, the twins unbuckled their seatbelts without assistance and opened the car door, stepping out into the crisp autumn air with surprising confidence. Adam carried the cassette player, cradling it carefully against his chest. "They're moving with remarkable spatial awareness," Dr. Whitfield observed quietly as they watched the boys navigate the gravel path. "Their blindness doesn't seem to impede them at all." "It's like they can see," Nathaniel murmured. "Just differently." The boys moved across the cemetery with purpose, no hesitation in their steps as they followed the path that wound between gravestones and memorial statues. Nathaniel and Dr. Whitfield followed a few paces behind, close enough to help if needed, but giving the twins their independence. When they reached Caroline's grave, both boys stopped in perfect unison. The headstone was simple but elegant, just as she would have wanted. "Caroline Elizabeth Turner, beloved wife and mother forever in our hearts." Elijah knelt down on the grass before the stone, his small hand reaching out to trace the letters of his mother's name. Adam remained standing, still holding the cassette player. "Mommy," Elijah whispered, his voice carrying in the still cemetery air. "We hear you." Nathaniel felt his heart constrict. The boys had never shown this kind of connection to Caroline's memory before. In the early days after the accident, they had been too traumatized, too lost in their own darkness. Later, as their silence deepened, Nathaniel had assumed they were protecting themselves from the pain of loss. But now, watching them at her grave, he wondered if there had been something else happening all along, some process of internal healing or awakening that he couldn't understand. Adam set the cassette player down on the grass and pressed the play button. For a moment there was only silence, then a soft hiss of static. Nathaniel held his breath, waiting. And then, Caroline's voice filled the air, clear and vibrant and achingly familiar. "My darling boys," she began, the same words from the tape Nathaniel had found in her study. "If you're listening to this, then you found your way back to the light. I always knew you would." Tears sprang to Nathaniel's eyes, hot and sudden. Dr. Whitfield placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "The darkness can be a teacher," Caroline's voice continued. "It shows us what truly matters, what we can see even when our eyes can't. I hope you've learned that lesson, my loves. I hope you've learned to see with your hearts." The twins sat perfectly still, their faces turned toward the cassette player as if it were their mother herself speaking to them. "And Nathaniel," Caroline's voice softened, becoming intimate, personal. "My love, if you're there too, please know that I forgive you. The accident wasn't your fault, not entirely. We were both angry that day. We both said things we didn't mean." A sob escaped Nathaniel's throat. The burden of guilt he'd carried for 3 years pressed down on him with crushing weight. "Let it go," Caroline's voice urged. "Let the guilt go. It's the only thing keeping us apart now." Adam turned toward his father, his unseeing eyes somehow finding Nathaniel's face with unerring accuracy. "She means it, Dad," he said softly. "She's been trying to tell you, but you wouldn't listen." A gust of wind swept through the cemetery, rustling the oak leaves above them. The cassette continued to play, but the voice was changing now, becoming fainter, more distant, as if Caroline were moving away. "I have to go now," her voice said, fading. "But remember, I'm always with you. Always. Just open your eyes and really see." The tape clicked off, leaving them in silence broken only by the soft whisper of leaves in the wind. Elijah stood up, brushing grass from his knees. With the same eerie certainty he'd shown in navigating the cemetery, he walked directly to Nathaniel and took his hand. "Daddy," he said, his voice small but clear. "Mommy left something for you too." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Nathaniel took it with trembling fingers, unfolding it carefully. It was a drawing clearly done by one of the twins of their family. 4 figures stood hand in hand, Nathaniel, Caroline, and the 2 boys. Above them, written in a child's uneven letters, were the words, "We forgive you." "I didn't draw that," Elijah said quietly. "It was under the cassette player when we woke up this morning, on the blue ribbon." Nathaniel stared at the paper, unable to speak. The handwriting was too neat for a blind child, the proportions of the drawing too perfect, yet the style was unmistakably childlike, innocent. "Who?" he began, but was interrupted by a strange sound from the cassette player. It had turned itself on again, but instead of Caroline's voice, it emitted a soft melody, a lullaby that Nathaniel recognized instantly. It was the song Caroline had always sung to the twins at bedtime, the same melody he'd heard coming from Rosie's radio that first night. As the music played, a strong breeze swept through the cemetery, swirling leaves around them in a dance of red and gold and brown. The twins lifted their faces to the wind, smiling as if they could see the colors whirling around them. And in that moment, with the sun warm on his face and his son smiling for the first time in years, Nathaniel felt something inside him break open, not in pain, but in release. The guilt he'd carried for so long began to dissolve, like ice melting in spring sunshine. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words meant for Caroline, wherever she was. "I'm so sorry." On the paper in his hand, where the childish drawing showed their family together, a single autumn leaf landed, bright blue, an impossible color in nature. The same blue as the ribbon, as Caroline's favorite dress, as the clear October sky above them. Spring sunlight streamed through the newly installed skylights of the Turner mansion, casting warm patterns across the polished hardwood floors. The house that had once been shrouded in darkness and silence now buzzed with activity and light. 6 months had passed since that day at the cemetery. 6 months of transformation that had touched every aspect of the Turner family's life. Nathaniel stood in the doorway of what had once been his formal dining room, watching as a young girl with thick glasses carefully ran her fingers over a relief map. Adam sat beside her, patiently guiding her hands to follow the raised contours of mountain ranges. "That's the Rocky Mountains," he explained, his voice confident and clear. "They run all the way from Canada down to New Mexico. Can you feel how much higher they are than the plains to the east?" The girl nodded, her face alight with discovery. "It's like I can see them in my mind." "Exactly," Adam said, smiling. "That's how it starts." In the center of the room, Elijah sat cross-legged on a colorful rug with 2 other children, all of them wearing specialized glasses with dark lenses. A woman who Nathaniel recognized as one of the vision specialists from the Springfield Center for Visual Impairment was demonstrating how to use a new type of sensory device. "Remember," she instructed, "this isn't about seeing with your eyes. It's about training your brain to process information differently." The Turner Institute for Sensory Development had officially opened its doors just 1 month ago, but already it was gaining national attention. What had begun as Nathaniel's personal quest to understand his son's mysterious abilities had evolved into something much larger, a pioneering center for children with visual impairments, housed right in the mansion that had once been a prison of grief. Dr. Whitfield appeared at Nathaniel's side, clipboard in hand. "The new family from Boston has arrived," he said quietly. "Their daughter lost her sight in a chemical accident last year. The parents are skeptical, but desperate." Nathaniel nodded. "They always are at first. Have the twins meet with her this afternoon. There's something about the way they explain it that helps other children understand." As Dr. Whitfield walked away, Nathaniel's gaze drifted to the large portrait that now hung on the wall where heavy drapes had once blocked out the light. Caroline smiled down at the room, her eyes seeming to follow the activities with approval. He'd commissioned the painting from a photograph taken on their last family vacation, wanting her presence to be felt throughout the house that was now helping so many children. A small hand tugged at his sleeve. He looked down to find a boy of about 5, his cloudy eyes indicating congenital blindness. "Mr. Turner?" the child asked hesitantly. "Is it true that your sons could really see ghosts?" Nathaniel smiled, crouching down to the boy's level. Not ghosts exactly, Jacob. They learn to see differently, to perceive things that most people miss because they rely too much on their eyes. Will I be able to do that too? I believe you already can, Nathaniel said gently. That's what we're going to help you discover here. The truth was both simpler and more complex than the rumors that had inevitably spread. The twins hadn't miraculously regained their physical sight. Instead, they had developed what Dr. Whitfield now called alternate perceptual pathways, neurological adaptations that allowed their brains to process sensory information in extraordinary ways. They couldn't see with their eyes, but they could perceive shapes, colors, and movements through a combination of heightened senses that science was still struggling to fully explain. And yes, sometimes they seemed to perceive things that weren't physically present, impressions, energies, what some might call spirits. Nathaniel had stopped trying to categorize these experiences. He simply accepted them as part of the mystery of consciousness, of the human mind's remarkable capacity for adaptation. The sound of the front door opening drew his attention. Henderson, who had chosen to stay on despite the mansion's transformation from private home to institute, was greeting someone in the foyer. Nathaniel excused himself from Jacob and moved toward the entrance, curious about the unscheduled visitor. A woman stood just inside the doorway, removing a light spring jacket. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she wore a simple blue dress that somehow looked both modern and timeless. When she turned toward him, Nathaniel felt his heart skip a beat. "Rosie," he said softly. She smiled. That same gentle, knowing smile he remembered from those strange autumn days 6 months ago. "Hello, Mr. Turner. You came back." He moved closer, still half believing she might vanish again if he blinked. "The boys will be thrilled. I told you I would return when the time was right," she said, her eyes taking in the transformed space around them. "You've done something wonderful here." Before Nathaniel could respond, twin shouts of joy echoed from the direction of the former dining room. Adam and Elijah came running through the hallway, navigating around furniture and people with the eerie precision that still amazed everyone who witnessed it. "Rosie!" they cried in unison, throwing themselves into her arms. She embraced them tightly, tears glistening in her eyes. "Look at you both," she murmured. "So strong, so bright." Elijah pulled back first, his unseeing eyes somehow finding her face. "You helped other children," he said. Not a question, but a statement. "Yes," she acknowledged. "There are others like you, children who need to learn how to see differently." "Will you stay this time?" Adam asked, his hand still clutching hers. Rosie glanced at Nathaniel over the boys' heads, a question in her eyes. He nodded, something in his chest expanding with warmth and certainty. "We have a position for a resident counselor," he said. "Someone who understands what these children are experiencing, who can help guide them through it." "And their families," Rosie added softly. "The parents need guidance too. They need to learn how to see differently themselves." Later that evening, after the day's activities had concluded and the visiting children had gone home, Nathaniel sat with Rosie on the mansion's wide veranda. The spring air was soft with the scent of new blossoms, and fireflies had begun to appear in the deepening twilight, their tiny lights blinking like earthbound stars. "I still have questions," Nathaniel said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "About you. About what happened here last fall." Rosie's hands were folded in her lap, her profile serene in the fading light. "Some questions don't have simple answers, Mr. Turner." "Nathaniel," he corrected gently. "After everything that's happened, I think we're well past formalities." She smiled, nodding her acceptance. "What would you like to know?" He hesitated, uncertain where to begin. "The psychiatric file, your son Elijah, the fire. Was any of that real?" "All of it," she said simply. "And none of it. Grief reshapes us, Nathaniel. Sometimes it breaks us into pieces that never quite fit back together the same way. From inside the house came the sound of the twins laughing with Henderson, who was preparing their evening snack. The sound was still new enough, precious enough to make Nathaniel pause and savor it before continuing. "And Caroline? The boys say they can still feel her presence, that she's still here in some way." Rosie's eyes softened. "Love doesn't end when life does. It transforms, like everything else in the universe. Your sons can sense that transformation because their perception isn't limited by conventional sight." She reached into her pocket and withdrew something small, pressing it into Nathaniel's palm. It was a library card, worn and faded, bearing the name Rose Turner. "What is this?" he asked, studying the card with confusion. "In another life, perhaps," she said enigmatically, "or another branch of the same tree. The universe has patterns that repeat, connections that span more than we can comprehend." Before he could question her further, the twins appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the warm light from inside. "Daddy," Elijah called. "Rosie, come see what we found." As they rose to join the boys, Rosie placed her hand briefly on Nathaniel's arm. "The greatest gift we can give our children is the ability to see beyond the visible," she said softly. "To perceive the connections that bind us all, even across the boundaries we think are final." In the library, the twins had discovered an old book on the highest shelf, a collection of folklore about second sight and psychic abilities across cultures. On the inside cover was a handwritten inscription. "To Caroline, who always believed in the unseen. Love, Mother." "Grandmother knew," Adam said excitedly. "She knew about seeing differently too." As the twins paged through the book, pointing out passages to each other with animated gestures, Nathaniel caught Rosie watching them with a look of profound peace on her face. In that moment, bathed in the golden light of the library lamps, surrounded by books and the laughter of his sons, Nathaniel felt the last piece of his broken heart mend itself back together. The mystery of Rosie, of who she was and how she had found them, might never be fully solved. But the gift she had brought to his family was real and tangible. A way back to the light. A path through grief toward healing. And the profound understanding that true vision comes not from the eyes but from the heart. As our story of the Turner family comes to a close, we're left wondering about the mysterious boundaries between worlds, how grief can blind us to what's right in front of us, and how sometimes it takes a stranger to help us see what we've been hiding from ourselves. Nathaniel's journey from guilt-ridden isolation to healing reminds us that the deepest wounds often require the most unexpected remedies. When was the last time you allowed someone to help you see differently? The twins' extraordinary ability to perceive beyond ordinary sight challenges us to question our own limitations. How often do we dismiss what we can't immediately understand? How many connections, how many presences, how many second chances might we be missing because we refuse to see with anything but our eyes? Perhaps there are Rosies in all our lives, guides who appear precisely when we need them most, helping us bridge the gap between what we know and what we need to learn. If this story touched your heart, remember that sharing meaningful stories is one way we connect across our own boundaries. Like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes true vision comes not from what we see, but what we feel. From darkness to light, from isolation to connection. Thank you for taking this journey with us.